got potential. He knows that you got power, and he knows that God has plans for your life. And the enemy loves to attack you when you're waiting on God to go to the next level. You're trying to live right. You're trying to do right. He can smell the anointing on you. He can smell God coming near you. The enemy loves to attack you when you are trusting God for advancement and when you are trying to give God your best, when God is pleased with your offerings and your service. The devil loves to attack a church that's about their Father's business. The devil will use key people to launch an attack on you. You know, people who supposedly got prestige and power and influence and position. And he'll use them to come after you. And then all of a sudden the saints of God sit back and they watch. But I'm here today to tell you that when the enemy throws a combination punch at you and you have fallen against the ropes, it's okay to lean on the ropes. Get your balance back, get your second wind, just cover your head and cover your body. Continue to move, throw counter punches at them. Remember, you're still standing, that the battle is not yours, it belongs to the Lord. David is talking to David, and he knows God is listening. Thank you, sir. David is talking to David because David wants to achieve the goals that God has for his life. David wants to move God's people to another level, and the enemy doesn't want him to go anywhere. So David reminds himself of God's faithfulness because the pressure was intense. He just might get to where God wanted him to be, and so the devil had to turn up the heat. Sometimes our necessary furnaces make us very uncomfortable, but know that your necessary furnace, you are not in there by yourself. David encouraged himself in the Lord. David says to himself, wait on the Lord. What David was learning in this pericope was not about trusting God to fight his battles. He knew God would do that. God had proven that over and over again. From the beginning of time, David knew that God was faithful to his people to fight the battles. David knew the history of his people and how they got over. He knew the Pentateuch. He knew the Almid. He knew about the 5 books of the Bible, first 5 books. He knew the books of Moses. He recalls their history, and then he grabs a pen of his own and records his own journey with God. He says in Psalm 3, God is a shield against those who rise up against you. He says in Psalm 5, God surrounds him with favor like a shield. He says in Psalm 23, God's rod and staff will comfort you. But then he adds some dessert to the menu, and he will prepare a table before you in the presence of your enemies. David was not concerned about his enemies. And I'm here today to tell you that the deal is sealed regarding your enemies. David was concerned about God's timing. David wanted to be in God's will. So David had to talk to himself about getting on board with God's timetable. He wanted to be in God's will, and he wanted to be in agreement with God's timing. So the first thing you need to know is that when you're waiting on God, it's proof that you trust him and you want what he has for your life. Your response to the holding pattern is proof that you trust God and you want what God has for your life. If the truth be told, the problems we have with God is not if, it's just when. Usually the biggest challenge we have as believers is we know he will supply all of our needs according to his riches and glory. But when, God? We know that by his stripes we are healed and that this sickness is not unto death. But when? We know that he's a keeper of perfect peace, all whose mind is stayed on thee. But I can't sleep at night. God, when? We know that we are like trees planted by rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in due season. But when is my season? Our biggest challenge is not trusting God to do it. That's guaranteed. God watches over his word to perform it. Our biggest challenge is trusting God's timing to do it. God, when? God, when? So my question for you today is, do you have enough faith to trust God when God has you in a holding pattern? Is your faith strong enough? Is your faith consistent enough? Do you believe what you cannot see? What do you do when the air traffic controller, that's God, tells you to wait? When God has you suspended in the air between the already and the not yet? When you're unemployed and your mortgage is due, your rent's due, and you're 2 and 3 months behind and you're waiting on the Lord and the doors of opportunities for employment have not opened? When you're sleeping single in a double bed and you're worried about what's going to happen to my marriage, what's going to happen to me and my children if he decides to leave, God, when are you going to make him love me again?